Welcome to the Wisdom Circle. To subscribe or follow us on your favorite podcast platforms, please visit us at www.thewisdomcircle.com.
Welcome to the first podcast of the Wisdom Circle. We have two friends here from a long time. Myself, Tony Ponturo. I was a long-time executive at Anheuser-Busch. I started in the advertising business, actually started as an NBC page, giving tours in the first Saturday Night Live. Worked at Anheuser-Busch, running the media, sports, entertainment marketing division, then moved on to produce Broadway shows, most notably in sports, one named Lombardi, about Vince Lombardi, and then taught in the university level with courses in leadership and crisis management, both at NYU and Columbia. So you'll hear from Ray in just a minute, but we feel like we have 40 years of experience and we want to give something back to you that listen to us and want to follow us as we go along. So let me next introduce my partner in this, Ray Warren. Ray?
Thank you, Tony. So it's great to be here. I think we've really got an inspirational kind of idea, which is, as you said, to give back. I started out, Tony, you and I both started at BBDO, 1978. So that's the 40 plus years. And we've been friends and colleagues ever since. We were buying together, and then I was selling to you and to others. So I jumped over to ABC. From ABC, I went off to a small company called Raycom Sports, where I thought I'd spend 3 years and I spent 15. So you never know in life what's going to happen next. Back to the agency side at OMD and Ciera. I was running Ciera Media Group, managing director at OMD. And then I went to Comcast, where I started at Comcast. We bought NBC while I was there. And my last 6 years was as president of Telemundo Sports, where they asked me to move to Miami, which wasn't terrible, because we were hosting the World Cups in Moscow and Qatar and Olympics and Premier League, etc. So been around the table. Tony spent more time making a straight line up the ladder at Anheuser-Busch. I spent a little bit more time rowing in different rivers, and I think that adds to our experience and what we do believe is something that we have to offer people who are looking to understand how they can grow a career, mentorships, and all those things in a very different world than Tony and I grew up in, but in a world that Tony and I participated in for the last 20 years since the world has changed.
Yeah, and a lot of you may be asking, okay, does the world really need another podcast? But every podcast takes a different sort of approach. When I taught at both NYU and Columbia, I used to tell my students, if you take one thing away from a 15-week semester, that was a win, and that we were both going to learn from each other. What you'll learn is that we're going to have a guest host every time we do a podcast, which will be about 2 times a month. We want to get a perspective from you, sort of the consumer, the person listening, what's important at all different generational ages. As you can tell from our look, we're a little older. One of the reasons we use the word wisdom, and we thought about that for a long time because we didn't want to come across too pompous. But as we sort of looked in the dictionary, wisdom is knowledge, experience, and judgment. So we felt that together, at least, 1 + 1 = hopefully 3 in this case, we could provide some of that to you. And so that was sort of the idea of the podcast, to bring something to people who want to maybe get a different perspective on things going on in the world, life skills, business skills, what's going on in the sports and entertainment world, and get some of those aha moments that say, I didn't really think of it that way. And that's an interesting perspective. And you probably only have to spend at any one time 20 or 25 minutes with us, so we won't wear you out with too much spin. And so with that, Ray, you may want to add a little more dimension than what I just did.
Yeah, I think that third party confirmation is always a fun thing and usually more credible. So um, for young people, hearing things around the dinner table from friends that they're friends with for a long period of time or short is fine. But when it's coming from someone who's just doing this because they have something to share, um, I think people hear it differently. I think that they're like, this person doesn't have anything invested in his outcome, not trying to get me to do something he wants me to do or tell me something I shouldn't do, because that creates resistance. We're here to like knock down any barriers to resistance and really just kind of open up to people of a younger generation who might want a mentor, who might want career management advice, who want to understand what did we expect as senior leaders of our companies, and does it matter, and how is the world flattened out with the digital world, et cetera. So yeah, I hope we don't wear you out. I think we're going to have a whole lot of fun with our host, and I think that does circle out the circle. It's not just two guys talking back and forth, because the world doesn't need that kind of podcast. The kind of podcast the world needs is one that's got great content that you can take something away from. Tony, to your point, 1 out of 2, 1 out of 15. If you come away with something sometime, then we'll have, made it worthwhile.
I used to use famous philosopher lines when I taught, whether it was Plato or Socrates or Aristotle. And it's interesting, if you go back to those different sayings, if you just Google in, Plato sayings, you'll find some interesting things that you'll realize were really just in today's world turned around in our language versus something back in 300 BC. And I believe it was Plato who said, you'll learn more from somebody and about somebody in an hour of fun than a day of hard work, And so I set that up to say the topics we'll talk about will be, I guess, reasonably serious, but hopefully you'll find that Ray and I don't take ourselves too seriously, that it's a conversation with you to get a perspective of where we're going. And so what's important with our first episode, and we've gone back and forth, is mentorship. And so that's going to be our theme in this first podcast do you need someone in your life or in business? And the one thing I want to say here real quickly is, don't think if you like it and want to recommend this to friends, this is not just for someone who goes to an office. This is for someone who may work at McDonald's or Walmart's, or as a police officer, or works at a hospital, because everything is about human interaction. It's about skills. It's about a culture where you work. And so hopefully this is about everybody that's out there having different human experiences, both in life and in business. And so with the first idea of mentorship, do you need a mentor? What does that even mean? And what kind of perspectives does that bring to you in your life? Ray, I'll let you interject there before we introduce our first.
Just a quick note about, I think we're more like navigators who've been down the road, right? So what we can do is, we've stepped on a lot of twigs and branches and fallen into some pots and potholes and traps and things. And having gone down the road once, we know that the second time is usually a little bit more informed, and we can kind of save a step using some of the experience we've had. And to your point, we're going to have some laughs and we're going to have some fun. And, we're already halfway through our first podcast. So back to you, and let's bring on our first guest.
So our first guest, I had the privilege of actually having her in my classroom at NYU. I taught a class on leadership and crisis management. These students were getting degrees in sports marketing. And so we talked about all the different issues of what a leader is, how does a leader handle a crisis situation. We won't take you through the whole class, but this guest sat in the class, and after graduation, when she was starting to go off to look for jobs and interview, etc., she came to me, and I'm sure a few others, and she'll speak to that, and said, would you be my mentor? And I took away that meant, can I have someone to bounce an idea off of? Not to tell me what to do, but what do you think of this? Or how would you approach this? And that was probably about 8 years ago. And we have continued that relationship. So our first guest is Ciera Rojas. Ciera is Senior Manager of Partnership at the USTA, the United States Tennis Association. 2 years ago, or probably a little less than 2 years ago, she was actually named by Sports Business Journal as one of the young voices under 30. So beyond myself being impressed with her, obviously she's made a lot of impressions across the business that she's in. So with that, it's our privilege to welcome Ciera Rojas. So
Thank
Ciera,
you.
thanks for joining us. And why don't I let you first tell everybody a little bit about yourself rather than me doing it?
First, thank you, Ray and Tony, for having me be the first guest on the Western Circle. Very, very excited to be a part of this and to be able to contribute in any way that I can. I've been with the USTA now for the last almost 8 years. This will be my 9th US Open, which is incredible to believe. And then I have to say, Tony, we've actually gone back a little bit over 10 years now, I think we're approaching. And it's crazy because along the way, I've been able to really have different roles within the USTA. But I would say before I came to the USTA, I had the opportunity to also intern at Yes Network, CBS Sports Network, as well as Major League Baseball, where I was able to really hone in on my passion for working in partnerships, which is where I am today, managing 8 of our corporate sponsors, as well as new business, and working alongside any potential clients that are coming on board to be part of the US Open.
That's great. And I'll start, Ray, and then I'll throw it to you. But so when you first came to me, other than, and I'm kidding here when I say this, wanting to get some introductions to help get a job, what was the real yeah, that's the first one. What were some of the reasons you asked me to be a mentor? And I know you have a few others. What inspired you to actually reach out?
I would say it goes back to that leadership in crisis situations class when Tony back then was Professor Ponturo, and we had.
I'm sorry. Okay.
It's tough for him to understand that.
Still dealing with it.
He was a standout, really. It was great being at NYU because we had professors that were in the industry. And Tony was great, of course, of going through the curriculum, but also adding in his personal experiences, right? Talking about companies, brands, agents, executives that we in the classroom, my colleagues and I, we knew these names, we knew these brands. And it was, for us, so exciting to have someone that was teaching us that had this experience before. So for us to be able to see, and for me in particular, wow, this is achievable, right? This is something that I would love to do and be a part of one day. And so it really was just coming full circle and seeing this as an opportunity for me to really get out there and be a part of something in the sports industry.
That's right. Right?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great track. I think it's interesting to me because the U.S. Open is just a major event, and to have the opportunity to grow in one place, it's always good to get your footing, right, in terms of what you love. How did you figure that? I mean, Tony is a master marketer. I was on the sales side, sponsorships and all those things. How did you decide this was a passion for you to pursue?
So it was instrumental for me in my career to be able to have internships in different departments. And I quickly learned how important relationships were. And I really enjoyed being in front of clients, being around partners. The executives at the USTA really helped mold me into what I am today, as well as Tony and a few of the other mentors that I have, which has been truly immense in my career success so far. But for partnerships specifically, I was really able to not only work with these brands, but create these different outlets, be able to see what marketing looks like across different categories, being able to achieve objectives that our partners have at the US Open, and to really see it have an impact with consumers, right? So you really get to see all areas of business of working in partnerships and also having an impact on a number of different levels.
Yeah, so Tony and I come from the days when, I forget who it was a retailer who said, all I know is when my advertising is on, I'm selling product, and when my advertising is off, I've stopped selling product. These days, to your point, I'm sure they can count, the number of packages that went out the door at a specific store with our FIDs and all that. So you're in a much more accountable business than we were, and there's an awful lot of people chasing, basically a finite amount of money, because people don't necessarily grow their budget just to grow the opportunity for all the audiences that are out there. So to hear you talk about what's turning you on at the USTA is interesting and exciting. It's got to be an interesting position to have. I have a question for you that Tony and I talked about earlier. So after 30-something years in the business, Ray Warren, boy from the Bronx, was asked to move to Miami to run Telemundo Sports, which is a Spanish language broadcast network with a cable network called Universo. I spoke Spanish in high school and college, but I was a fish out of water. I think more so because of the level I went in at than some people are. But I'm very interested because I love Telemundo and the people there and their passion and the way they are. Very different, frankly, than the English language companies I work for, in a good way. And I just wonder, I don't know what your background is, but your name does suggest that you have a Hispanic background. And I'm wondering if that has in any way molded you, your upbringing, anything you feel comfortable sharing about your work experience. Because I know it from going the other way, right? We're both names that don't, sit exactly perfectly in the, Tony Ponturo world. So yeah, I'm just curious about that because I'm so in love with Spanish language marketing and the growth potential and the company at Telemundo.
Yeah. So I would say even though I'm American, I am very proud of my half Peruvian background on my father's side. Yes,
Very
Peru.
nice.
I would say in my upbringing, family was, of course, the most important value in just building relationships, taking care of others, and how important that is starting from the very beginning and just instilling that value in me through all my relatives. And I will say today as well, my fiance is also Peruvian, right? So I do get to see these different dynamics of he also works with a Latin American team and just seeing how things are very driven by people and relationships, culture, and just how that makes an impact on business. I think it's very interesting to have different perspectives in the room because not only do you have these different intelligence levels, but it's also relationship building and just seeing how people interact with each other has truly had a big impact.
Yeah, it's almost like a secret sauce for you because not everybody approaches things that way. And I think when it's kind of built in to like the way you were raised, I'm sure it comes across to your clients. And I'm happy to hear that. That's really great. And I love it. The gentleman who hired me at Telemundo, Cesar Conde, is Peruvian. So during the World Cup, we always had to make sure he had tickets to the Peru game, and hopefully they'll make it to the World Cup in 2026. So
fingers crossed. No, but I would say from all your experience that you've had at Telemundo, Comcast, and all these big companies, how have you been able to engage junior employees? Because I think, at least from the experiences that I've had in talking to others, not just the USTA, but many sports properties, brands, they want to know how can they get in touch with these senior leaders. So I think that's really been a challenge of just trying to navigate and trying to help others get there.
So one of the things that I've done at every job, and it really was important at Telemundo, is I call it management by walking around. I walk the floor. If I had meetings, I was in a meeting, but when not, I'd go up to one of our producers who was working on cutting some clips. His name was Jaime Penalosa. Hey, Jaime, how's it going? What can I help you with? Like, I wanted to be, I used to call myself like the traveler's umbrella. Like everything that comes down from upon high, I will, you won't get wet. Just, you got to tell me the truth. No surprises, please. And it was just a very open environment. And I think people, I come from an Italian background. My last name is Warren, but my mother's maiden name was Napoli. So she's from Naples.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an Italian house, if I tell you. So that family spirit. And I love working with young people. I work, my alma mater was York College, little tiny school in Jamaica, Queens, City University of New York. And I'm still on the board. I'm on the advancement committee, et cetera. So while I'm not in the classroom the way Tony was, that school has a very special place in my heart, and young people too. I've got 3 kids, so they don't listen to me; they listen to third party. But I just enjoy helping people understand how to do better because to me, it's a little bit of a mission, and it's management by walking around. Getting to know everybody. I would always have all hands meetings every month. No bad questions, guys, gals, anything you want to ask. And I get some tough ones. One person once said to me, I was at Ciera doing one of these sessions, and they said, well, when I started here, the amount of money you guys were paying me allowed me to apply for food stamps. What's the plan for Ciera to raise the starting wage for people coming into Ciera? First thing I thought was a little bit of like, really? The second thing was good for her because, I want to know that. And, I went into you get a lot of overtime. You get taken to places where maybe you're getting free food, etc. And unfortunately, because there's always a line out the door of people who want to start working at Ciera for that rate, we don't feel that pressure. It's not like everyone else is paying everyone more. But I loved, and people came up to me afterwards, and they were pretty excited that like, wow, you didn't just cut her off or tell her how dare you or like, get out. So it's just about patience and understanding that you want an open dialogue. You want people. I was once told, surround yourself with people who will tell you the truth. And once that stops, you're in trouble as a leader. People stop telling you the truth because they're afraid. Not good.
So, sort of dovetailing on that, how would you advise people your age that let's make the assumption that it's important to keep your ears open to learn from people that are older and have gone through the process? A lot of times some young people, even when I've consulted, say, well, that's not how we do it now, or, it's just a different generational thing. But I'll be selfish for a second to say it seems like a lost opportunity to just listen and say, again, I've never thought about that. So assuming you see the value of someone experienced, I won't say an older voice, but an experienced voice, how would you, either advise people with experience to talk better to younger people or to advise younger people listening why that's a value, assuming you believe that?
With college students and also young executives that I've been mentoring for the last few years, I would say the first thing that I'm asked is, how did you get to where you are today? And I always come back to the value of mentorship, right? And the mentors that I have. I always like to say that I have this personal board of mentors that I can call, and Tony being one of them. And with these young executives and people that are just graduating, it's really being comfortable talking to senior leaders, right? Are you reaching out on LinkedIn? Are you able to just grab an email from someone that you're able to make a connection with? Can you show up at the conferences and raise your hand and ask a question? It's really just trying to find ways to stand out, and also kind of just being that annoyance sometimes, right? Because you don't always get a response. And I think that's when a lot of young people get turned off, because they think that they're being a bother, or someone will think they're just looking for a new job, right? So it's kind of having that ambition and drive to keep going. I would say with senior leaders, it's really being able to, of course, like Ray was saying, of just walking around, having that face time, being able to connect back with someone of something they told you a week ago, a month ago, and just really establishing that connection. And I would also say being present in those meetings, and also knowing that while you are mentoring a younger executive, that it can also provide something to you as well, right? Of course, both have to make sure that they are ready and prepared. So I think that's also a way to make that a positive experience.
That's great. I think for the sake of time, we always said we would be tight with our podcast here. Do you have any last question or anything you'd like to add before we sort of sign off for this historic first podcast?
Yeah, just one last question for either one of you, right? Or both, like your perspectives would be great, is knowing that the industry is changing, the pandemic has created a ton of cultural shifts, and we have many young leaders and people that are coming up in the ranks that have really had this behind video, digital wall, right? They're not really in person as much anymore. So what should we be doing to really help grow this next generation of leaders?
Ray, you want to take that first? And
Yeah, sure. I think that so this is it's funny. I was going to ask you the same thing about hybrid work and what it's like to try to advance in that kind of a culture. I think it's going to be somewhat self-selecting, that the people who, and I don't want this to sound like a guy who grew up in an office tower and wore a suit to work and did all that stuff, but you have to know people. And it's the third dimension, the eye contact, the physical nature of being in a room is really important. And I would just suggest that as often as you can, try to make it a personal touch. And it's important to show up. I think Woody Allen said 80% of life is just showing up. And you really have to work it. I think it's really hard because texts and emails these days are like such a commodity. They don't always have to be answered, and it may not be rude, but people might feel like they've been treated rudely. It's just sometimes you get so many that you can't. Not me. I would sit down every night. I would clean out my mailbox, clean out my messages. But I really think that the important part is to let people know that, look, this is a self-selecting process. You don't have to come to work. You can work hybrid all you like, but they're going to remember people who have to make decisions about the next level are going to know the people that they've seen more of. And I think it's just critically important. And it's not about old school. It's about human nature. Human nature is we're social beings. And this wall is not going to do it forever, right? It's not going to be the way. So that's
the motto of Anheuser-Busch, which permeated throughout the whole time I was there, was started by Adolphus Busch, the founder of the company, and it was making friends is our business. And what we learned is that, real partnerships are not just who's spending the money and cutting a deal and who's the smartest person in the room. It's really building real friendships and partnerships. And that lasts a lifetime. I still today, 15 years removed from Anheuser-Busch, have people talk about a deal, an event, something, and that lasts forever. How we actually negotiated the deal, who got, a penny better or a penny less. It's not really the conversation that continues, and it's really the friendships. And so, to Ray's point, the people side, and I think what's real important, particularly if college students are listening, is that most of us are smart people, right? A lot of us are smart people. And the thing that will make the difference in a room, in a promotion, is like, okay, if there's 10 people that are really smart, who's going to be the person that jumps out? And it's going to be the person who has a personality, who has teamwork, who, wants to support everyone, who listens, who supports. That's the difference. And so if you're just at home all the time, which, as Ray said, is your choice, and if your company is okay with that, find ways to just, go see your boss, go see your peers, go see associates, go have a
breakfast, meet for lunch.
Exactly.
Something outside of the office.
It's so important.
I don't want to interrupt you, Tony. You can conclude the thought?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it's funny because as you were saying all that, I was in such agreement. So we didn't call this podcast the Smart Circle, right? Tony and I are smart. We're damn smart. But you know what? There are smarter people out there who haven't done as well or done as much because it's about time and experience and judgment. That is kind of like the washing effect of how you achieve things and grow in a business. There's always going to be somebody smarter than me in a room, no doubt. But that doesn't mean a lot if they don't have all these other characteristics that make them more than one dimensional. And I think, that's the key to advancement, et cetera. It's about not just always wanting to be the smartest person in the room.
Exactly. We have to keep all of us being students of the business.
Exactly. Very good. Yeah.
So Ciera, we can't thank you enough for jumping into the pool here with us in the high end and for being our first guest.
Season 1, episode 1.
And it's, the listeners should know we didn't even rehearse this. We wanted it to be organic and natural. We didn't know what Ciera was going to ask us, and she didn't know what we were going to ask her, which is what life is, right? You have to react when something addresses you, and how do you address it? So on behalf of the Wisdom Circle, we thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tony and Ray. It was great.
Thanks for joining us.
And to all of our listeners, we hope you enjoyed our first episode, and we look forward to doing many, many more.